Hello world, welcome to Keith's Universe. This is a pro-humanist, pro-vegan channel. I discuss a wide range of issues here, such as the issue I am going to discuss today. Without further ado, roll the intro. So a very common issue that pops up a lot on social media and even mainstream media for that matter. That is the issue of certain comedians using their comedy and their platforms to promote what many would regard as bad takes. Bigoted jokes or offensive jokes in one way or another. Now this raises quite a few questions. Firstly, is everything truly fair game, as many have claimed, when it comes to comedy? Or are there certain topics that are indeed off the table? And if there are certain topics that are off the table, what exactly does that say about freedom of speech? We also need to ask the question, should political commentary expressed through comedy be treated any differently from political commentary expressed through different media, such as a news article, a blog post, a podcast recording, a YouTube video, or simply a statement on live television? Should those political commentaries be treated differently compared to political commentaries stated within comedy? And why? And how exactly would we justify such a differentiation? And lastly, what is the role of comedy? What is it all for? What does it serve within the scope of cultural significance? So before I get into the nitty-gritty of answering those very questions, you may be asking yourself, Keith, what exactly are you and your fellow leftists objecting to? Well, first of all, not all leftists are necessarily going to agree with me, and I would hope that the vast majority of leftists would think for themselves and decide for themselves if they do in fact agree with me or not. But based on my own perspectives and observations, it seems to me that there has always been offensive jokes. Some have been racist, others homophobic, others transphobic, misogynistic, and the list goes on. So without getting into the free speech point just yet, I would like to discuss some of my problems I have with bigoted jokes. Well, firstly, a lot of these comedians have enormous fan bases and platforms. A lot of their fans are arguably very impressionable, especially when it comes to comedians such as Ricky Gervais, who I am a former fan of, by the way. But when it comes to tweets such as the one you can see on your screen right now, which was only tweeted about 2 years ago, I can't help but lose a lot of respect for him. As a humanist and as a trans ally, I find it disgusting. When you have such a huge platform as Ricky Gervais and you're promoting this ignorant transphobic mentality, you are basically reinforcing transphobia itself. Even if you were trying to be sarcastic, you are on one hand fueling those who are already intensely transphobic. You're also not helping the fact that suicide within the trans community is such a huge problem. So comedians like Ricky Gervais are part of the problem and certainly not part of any solution. And there are consequences to take into account here. So in the interest of providing more context, let us now look at those questions that I posed at the start of this video. Is everything fair game? Well, that all depends on what fair game actually means. A comedian is free to really joke about whatever they want. In fact, that doesn't just go for comedians, by the way. But that doesn't entitle said comedian to an applause or the public finding their material funny. We do, in fact, have a right to not find their material funny. I'll give you an example of this from personal experience. A couple of years ago, I was on holiday in Tenerife, and there was this bar with live music and live entertainment. It looked fun, so I thought I'd check it out and have a few drinks and whatnot. But towards the end of the night, they had this comedian as part of the entertainment. I had not heard of this person before, had no idea who he was. So anyway, the comedian in question was Roy Chubby Brown, who is an insult comic. So pretty much all of his material was homophobic and misogynistic. His material was just honestly pure vulgar. And the saddest thing of all was not one single person in the entire bar laughed at any of his jokes, aside from a few sort of very awkward laughs. Now when this happens to most other comedians, they try a different material to see how that hits with the audience, but instead, what does he do? He berates the audience for not laughing at his jokes. From what I recall, he made some jabs stating, "Oh, what is this, a gay bar?" As if a gay bar would ever let him in the first place. Suffice to say, I did not hang around to listen to all of this guy's vulgar material. He is a type of comedian that actually makes Ricky Gervais look tame in comparison. What the point is, comedians are not entitled to any audience finding their material funny. If their jokes are falling flat, maybe this has less to do with the audience and more to do with the actual material. Are there certain topics that are off the table? I think this has a lot less to do with what is off the table and more about how the joke is going to be received. Are people going to find it funny? Is this actually funny? I would also suggest that topics such as rape, death, suicide, mass murder are probably best to be avoided. Quite honestly, if you do find that sort of thing funny, you most likely have a lot of sadistic tendencies. You probably have a lot of mental health problems, and you should probably go and talk to someone. As I already previously expressed, I do not condone bigoted jokes. In my opinion, they only reinforce the bigotry itself. I also don't buy into what I call the South Park defense, which is basically the notion of being an equal opportunity offender. This idea that if everyone is equally ridiculed, it will somehow bring us closer together. If anything, all this has ever done is spawned a toxic culture of edgelords. And I know that's not exactly the most refined way of expressing my point, but it is the best means that comes to my mind right now. I just don't buy into this whole concept of creating equality through negativity. I have a hard time believing that has ever been effective or worked. What about freedom of speech? Well, I have already hinted to how freedom of speech ties into this. And I support freedom of speech. As a humanist, I think it is so very important, especially when it comes to us being able to freely express ourselves to the most truthful extent that we possibly can. But there are a few things concerning freedom of speech that we really should consider. Firstly, freedom of speech does not equate to meaning a freedom from consequences. If you are a comedian or indeed any form of celebrity and there is a recording or a tweet of you making a statement that is either misogynistic, homophobic, racist, whatever it is, don't expect every single one of your fans to continue supporting you. Which now leads me to the other aspect in which freedom of speech does also not equate to. Freedom of speech does not equate to a freedom from criticism. You simply cannot have free speech without criticism. It really should go without saying. I couldn't even count the amount of times I've been accused of denying one their freedom of speech, simply based on the grounds of me criticizing a viewpoint. And when I say criticizing a viewpoint, I actually mean criticizing the viewpoint. This is not Keith saying, "Oh no, that is offensive, you can't say that, you should not say that." I mean actually criticizing the viewpoint, looking at what's being said, discussing the problems it causes, and why it is a problem for society and why it is a narrow view. Disagreeing is not the same thing as silencing, nor is it me telling you what you can or cannot say. If you make a racist joke, chances are you're going to be called a racist, or at least receive some level of negative feedback based upon that statement. Is political commentary in comedy different from political commentary via different mediums? It is only different in the sense to how the political commentary in question is delivered, how it is written, and how it is vocalized or performed. Other than that, it really serves the same purpose or same end goal. Political commentary through comedy should be treated no differently from political comedy through, let's say, movies, music, podcasts, news articles, you name it. This idea that because it's comedy, it somehow gets a free pass or it's on a different pedestal, I don't buy that argument at all. If a comedian is challenged on a bad take and their only response is, they're just jokes. Well, that's not exactly taking accountability for the damage and the problems that they may have caused with that joke. And a lot of the time, they are an accurate depiction of the true thoughts of the comedian and their take on certain issues, just delivered in a more comedic style, or at least an attempted comedic style. More often than not, the intent of these jokes is to make light of something the comedian doesn't agree with, and in many times ridiculing that very discussion, topic, or even group of people. Many times exaggerating the issue in a comedic way, but still in the confines of the perception of the reality of the case. So, sorry comedians, you're not special, you don't get a free pass, you are not above us all. Your comedy can be subject to criticism and consequences just like everyone else. They're just jokes. Isn't an excuse, it's the coward's way out. The role of comedy. The role of comedy should be very simple and very obvious. To make people laugh, to make people happy, to allow people to put aside the worries and the strife and the stress of their life, and to a certain extent, to allow them to feel better about themselves. So in my opinion, when comedy is used for the complete opposite, that is to make others feel miserable, to bring them down and to make them feel more depressed and sad than they already are, in my opinion, that is a depravity of comedy, a depravity to why comedy as an art form was created in the first place. There's enough doom and gloom and depression and sadness and people losing loved ones during the pandemic. I think comedians should be trying to get more innovative with their comedy and using it to raise people's spirits. In terms of cultural significance, comedy could play a role in uniting many cultures together by raising everyone up through material that inspires us to be better human beings. And so everyone, that is my take on insult comedy and this whole notion that comedians somehow get special privileges when it comes to consequences, or rather a lack of consequences in terms of their bad takes on certain issues. So as always, comment down below and let me know your thoughts. If you like this video, give it a good old thumbs up. If you like my content, please do subscribe. And I would really appreciate it if you could also share my content on social media. And you also might be interested to check out the latest video on my main channel entitled Nerdy Memes, which is a brand new segment on the Nerdy Key channel. So feel free to check that out. Until next time, everyone, love, respect, and take care.